Here we are.
Yes, we are.
And Taco is here as well.
also here. She needed to contribute this week.
Yes.
So what's new?
Frankly, I'm ready for bed.
Same.
Taco's also ready for bed. I've been crocheting for like 3 days straight, and I'm tired of it. But I'm done until possibly this weekend.
Yeah.
Depending on what happens this weekend.
Yeah.
And, that's really about it. Oh, and my car ghost is back.
Your car ghost is back. I experienced that one firsthand.
Yes. I was trying to text our mother and tell her that the roads were flooded. And the first time it said, and there's been some debate about what it said the first time. We all heard something different, but it either said like low or whoa or lol or oh, something like that.
Yeah.
So then I tried again, and it just said L. Just like the letter L. And then I tried again, and it said shoe.
Yep. So, I don't know. I don't know what it was trying to tell us.
I don't know. But, it was definitely not getting my message through.
No, it was definitely not the roads are really flooded.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
I think I said the roads are super flooded here or something like that, and I said the exact same thing 3 times, and these are the 3 messages I got back.
It would be nice if it could just rain without flooding.
Yeah, Taco agrees. She's very vocal tonight.
Yeah, she's Google.
But, yeah, it's been having a lot of issues with flooding lately whenever it rains good. It tore up that fun plastic thing under the front of my car. I don't even know what that thing is, but it seems to...
It's a splash shield, I learned whenever I was Googling.
Well, it seems to cause more harm than it does good. Because it seems to break on everybody's car.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to be there so that, like, road gunk and stuff doesn't get up into, like, your engine and
Well,
things.
road gunk is getting up into my engine and things because the thing is dragging on the ground, making a great deal of noise. So, I get to have my car sound stupid until I get a chance to get that fixed.
Yep. Or at least until we can go outside when it's not raining and see if there's some way to, like, reattach it in the meantime.
Yeah, I don't know.
At least get it enough off the ground that it doesn't scrape. But
yeah.
Those things are stupid.
It's embarrassing.
It really is.
So, that's all that's new with me. What about you?
I don't feel good.
That's what I hear.
But, it's day 3 of summer school?
Yes.
It's just crazy because, so, summer school in the past has always been, like, there was a required seat time, so regardless of whether they finished or not, they had to stay because they had to be there. But I guess now, the rule, it's like, the seat time has already been, fulfilled by, like, them being in school in that class or whatever. And so for summer school, and it's all like self-paced, it's an online course, right, for summer school. And so and they can work on it at summer school for the 4 hours that they're there. They can work on it at home. There's no limitations. They can work on it as much as they can, or as much as they want to. And as soon as they finish, they have to take their final at the school, and then they can be done. I think I've only had one finish so far, and I'm just like, what's the matter with you people? Like, why aren't you, like, trying to get done so you don't have to sit here? Yeah. But other than that, I don't know. I don't think there's anything new.
Cool.
So, I guess. Oh. So I realized when I was telling you the story last week about the yogurt store. And remember, all of the little girls were in FFA, and they were all raising animals. And the one little girl was raising a pig named Stony. And I was like, remind me to tell you about Stony at the end of the episode. And then whenever I was editing, I was like, we didn't talk about Stony at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I completely forgot you even told me that.
I know. But I just thought I'd let you know. He was sent to, like, one of those, like, rescue farms where he just got to live out his little happy pig life there.
As all pigs should.
Yep. Also, I guess the universe is trying to get me to watch The Office.
Why?
I don't know, but, like one day I was like, maybe I'll watch The Office, but we didn't have any streaming services that had The Office. And then the other day I realized that series of books that me and Bear are listening to is written by a man named Michael Scott. And then one of the guys from our story last week was also named Michael Scott.
Oh, I didn't notice that one, but
and
I did
was
notice
like,
the one of the book.
Maybe this is the universe telling me that I just need to go ahead and watch The Office so that I can get everybody else's jokes.
Right.
And last thing that I wrote down was last week, the day that we recorded, was the 31st anniversary of OJ's police chase.
Oh boy.
I know. Do you remember the police chase?
Of course.
I didn't know if you were old enough to remember.
No, I remember vividly.
Because we were in a motel in Ruidoso.
I don't remember that part, but I do remember the police chase.
We were in that hotel that eventually fell apart.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was the trip where we went to the Ruidoso Downs, and I got that white shirt that had like the holographic Ruidoso Downs like logo on it that I really liked. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
No.
Alright, well, I'm going to tell you a story today.
Okay.
And this may be our longest one yet.
Oh boy.
I know.
They've been getting longer lately.
Longer and longer. Most podcasts that cover this have covered it in multiple episodes.
Okay.
So, I guess we'll see. I'll keep an eye on the clock, and if we need to wrap it up and try again another time, we will. But, so I heard this story on a podcast a couple of years ago, and it's like one of those stories that stayed with me. It's not Brandon Swanson, but it's like lives in my brain like Brandon Swanson. And it's a case that infuriates me. It's not Bryce Lost Pizza.
I was gonna say, it's not Bryce Lost Pizza either.
But it infuriates me. Like, Bryce Lost Pizza's story infuriates me. But I think this probably has been my most, like, labor-intensive case other than Dina Lingor. But mostly because that one I had to go back and look at old newspapers because you couldn't, like, Google things about it. But anyway, so we're heading to the land down under.
Okay.
Specifically, we are in the luxury high-rise Valencia apartment building on St. Kilda Road in Melbourne.
There's been some other stuff happening in the land down under recently. Some little girl, she was like 17, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
She's like 17, living with these two random 30-something-year-olds who are not related to her in any way, shape, or form. So I don't really know how she came to live with these people. They were just like roommates to her. It's not like they were parenting her.
Yeah.
She had a family. But, they said that they took her to the airport and that she just vanished. Except they actually murdered her.
Yeah.
And
that sounds about right. What in the world was that noise?
I think the dog burping.
Oh, okay.
All right. Anyway, so that's been in the news recently, and a lot of people have been covering that case, but
this is not that case.
No.
So, Melbourne is located in the state of Victoria, which is the smallest of Australia's states after Tasmania. And that's just a fun fact. It doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Just a fun little facty.
So, it's December 2nd, 2010.
So it's hot.
Yes, it's the middle of summer. Yeah. So, the concierge of the apartments, because this is luxury, so they have a concierge, named Betel Ozulup. She went by Beth. She comes on her shift. She meets with the manager, Eric Giamario, who fills her in on the day. And he leaves. And then between 7:04 and 7:11, Beth heads to the, trash compactor room to look for a broom to sweep up a mess in the elevator.
Okay.
There's one source that said that the manager had told her that the trash compactor had been serviced that day and had asked her to go look for it, but I only heard that once. Everything else said she was going in there to find a broom. So she unlocks the door and pushes it open, and it won't open, like there's something blocking it. So she does what any of us would do. She puts a little shoulder into it, and it gets it open enough to see that there's a body on the floor.
Yes.
And I picture her kind of shoving the door open a little, seeing the body, and immediately, shutting the door. Because then she says that she braved another look, praying it was a mannequin. But realized the person was laying in a pool of blood. So not a mannequin.
Mannequins don't often lie in pools of blood.
No. I don't know if maybe, the creepy ones from Doctor Who.
I don't know that they had any blood.
No, probably not. They're just creepy.
They're just creepy mannequins.
So, understandably, she freaked out. She called the building manager, Eric, and he said that she was frantic. He could barely understand what she was saying, but he finally got enough out of her to tell her to call 000, which is Australia's 911. So the body turned out to be 24-year-old Phoebe Handsjuk.
That little girl's name is Phoebe, too.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
So, she had been living on the 12th floor of the Valencia with her boyfriend, Anthony Hampel, and it appeared that she had fallen through the garbage chute from the 12th floor and had gone through the trash compactor.
Fun.
However, the fall did not kill her. It appeared from blood smears on the floor of the compactor room that Phoebe had crawled around the room, seemingly looking for a way out of the room before succumbing to blood loss. So, is this something that you are familiar with?
Part of this sounds familiar to me, but I don't know if it's just similar to another case or not.
Okay.
But it does sound familiar.
So, before we move on to the rest of the story, based on how every other podcast seemed to handle this, I'm going to make a quick disclaimer, just to be clear. So, obviously, we are talking about the death of Phoebe Handsjuk. This is a case that's gotten a lot of attention over the years and raised a lot of questions. So everything that we talk about is based on publicly available information, and we're not claiming to have any inside knowledge, nor are we making accusations. We're just discussing the case as it's been reported and sharing our thoughts. I don't know why I can't talk today. Sorry. Okay. So, we also want to note that Anthony Hampel, Phoebe's boyfriend at the time, has consistently denied any involvement in her death and has not been charged with any wrongdoing. In fact, he's been fully exonerated by the coroner of any involvement in her death. Nothing we say in this episode is meant to suggest otherwise. This episode is for storytelling and discussion, and we encourage you to explore the case for yourselves and draw your own conclusions. So, hopefully legally recovered. But basically every podcast I listened to gave a disclaimer to that effect. It was funny because I listened to Sinisterhood. They did a 3-part episode on this. And they just kept saying, Aunt Hempel has been cleared of all involvement. We are not suggesting otherwise, just over and over in the podcast, just randomly sprinkled in. But based on their podcast, they said that they did a lot of research into Australians' defamation laws, just based on the fact that they also had heard disclaimers from other podcasts about it. And they said that I guess there's a difference between giving an honest opinion based on the publicly known facts and implying that someone did something criminal. So just taking from that, it seems that as long as we are giving our honest opinions based on publicly known facts from the case, which includes the coroner's report, we should be okay. And as long as we clarify that we are aware that Anthony Hampel has been cleared of any involvement, we are not suggesting otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay? So onward and upward. So Phoebe Handsjuk was born May 9th, 1986 to Lynn and Natalie Handsjuk. She's the oldest of 3 children. Her 2 brothers are Tom and Nikolai. Her father is a psychiatrist and her mother was a veterinary nurse. And by her mother's account, the kids had a pretty idyllic childhood. They lived in a big house in the suburbs of Melbourne and they had a big garden to play in.
Sounds nice.
Yep. So Phoebe is described by family and friends as being cheeky and vibrant. She didn't like anybody telling her what to do. She was a gifted poet, artist. She also played the guitar. She carried a journal with her everywhere she went, and she would write or draw just, like, whatever inspired her at the time. I didn't write it down, but there's a 6-part series called Phoebe's Fall.
Mm-hmm.
And one of her friends in the podcast that was interviewed said that she had got a job at McDonald's, and she went, like, the first day, and then the second day she was like, wow, I really hate this job.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to, like, turn in your uniform before, like, you quit or whatever. And so she just went in, like, the room where the ice machine was and, like, took it off and left it there and ran home in her underwear.
Mm-hmm. That's one way to do it.
She was silly. So depending on the source, between, like, 13 and 15, Phoebe started going out to clubs with friends, which seems crazy.
Yeah.
I understand that Melbourne's a big city, but, like, is this something that people in big cities do? Because, I mean, we don't have clubs here.
Yeah.
So that wasn't even available to us.
No.
I just can't even imagine, like, being that young and doing that. But
I don't know. I guess it's something that's more common in bigger places.
yeah. I know I've heard stories from, like the 70s and stuff, where there were even specific clubs just for teenagers.
Well, and I think in bigger cities there still are. And, like, I know this is not real life, nor is it even close to real life, but I know, like, on, like, Buffy, they would go to the Bronze, like, they couldn't, like, drink or anything, but, like, they could go to the Bronze and watch bands play and stuff like that,
true.
and they were just in high school, so...
Yeah. And I can't believe that you would tell me now that Buffy was not real life. I thought
I
that
know.
was a documentary.
I'm sorry.
About a vampire slayer.
I'm sorry. I thought that you knew.
I didn't know. I thought that was all real.
No.
Alright, well, anyway, so Phoebe and her friends would use fake IDs, but I was like, what 13-year-old looks 18?
Right.
But apparently she did look much older than her age. One of her friends who was interviewed for the Phoebe's Fall podcast said that they would have, like, $20 between them, but that they didn't need money because the men in the clubs would buy them drinks. And then Phoebe would disappear and she'd come back with handfuls of drugs. And they would be like, where did you get those? And she'd be like, they just gave them to me. And so
Okay.
she was experimenting also with drugs at this time in her young life. So she was a bit of a wild child. And on 60 Minutes Australia, her mom said that Phoebe drove it like she stole it. So, that's... Oh, all that's interesting claims that at one point she ran away from home and lived with an ex-convict and his child for 8 weeks.
Okay.
I know. On the Phoebe's Fall podcast, her mom and grandmother discuss her relationship with a 30-year-old teacher when she was just 16. This one really bothered me because this 30-year-old man who was in charge of children should have been fired.
Mm-hmm.
But as the story goes, he left the school that she was at. So it was not to break any of the school rules.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not worry about the law.
Yeah.
And that he even lived with Phoebe and her mother for a while.
Gross.
I know. And I don't remember if it was the Sinisterhood episode that I listened to or something, but they were like, you know, maybe her mom was just like, she's gonna do it anyway, so maybe if I, like, am able to keep an eye on the relationship or something. I don't know, but I thought it was weird.
That whole thing bothers me.
Mm-hmm. And her mother says that she was also in a relationship with a teacher when she was the same age, and so I don't know if she was like, I did it, so I guess it's okay that she's doing it, or I can't say anything about it. Like,
yeah, you can.
I know. Like, it creeped me out. And I'm not throwing shade at her mom.
It's just the whole situation is
icky
just
to me.
Icky.
Because, like, he was an actual adult man,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a child, and he should have known better, but this man in this relationship is not what caused her death, so. When she was 16, she started taking antidepressants, and apparently both of her parents were against her doing this. And she would go on and off them on her own, like sporadically, which you are definitely not supposed to do. And so it would make them less effective because they're not being able to, like, build up in your system. Okay, so both her grandmother and her mother said that Phoebe had an obsession with older men. After the teacher, she was in a relationship with another older man who was an actor and musician. And then when she was in art school, she apparently sent an email to the teacher demanding that he have an affair with her. And she was then kicked out of art school for that.
That's a weird way to go about things.
It really is. Yeah.
I don't really know how you decide to demand someone have an affair with you, especially an authority figure, and you write them an email and let them know.
I know, like, what does the email say?
I would need more information on said email.
Right. But apparently it existed because she did get kicked out of art school, so.
Yeah.
So her parents divorced when she was in her mid-teens, and she took it really hard. She didn't talk to her dad for a few years. But, you know, she had, like, even just from an early age, there was a lot of drinking and drug use. Her grandmother described her as sensitive, felt that the substance abuse wasn't good for her because it affected her emotions a lot. Plus, when you're young and your brain is developing and just in general making terrible decisions because you're a teenager, you shouldn't compound that with substance abuse.
Well, yeah, you're already making terrible decisions, and I'm sure that's not helped by adding drugs to the mix.
No. So, I couldn't figure out exactly when, but Phoebe also trained in martial arts at the Melbourne Fight Club.
Okay.
She made friends with a professional boxer named Sarah Howitt, who also trained at the club. Sarah said that Phoebe would spend like 8 hours a day there training, and she was fast-tracked to get her black belt in 2 years, whereas most people take 5 years to get there.
Okay.
And I was curious if that was going on at the same time as her death, because it seems like with her drinking and drug use that it seemed to ramp up before her death. That would have made training more difficult.
Right.
And so I couldn't find anything giving the dates of when she was doing this, so I don't know. But by all accounts, Phoebe had many friends who loved her and enjoyed spending time with her. She was really close to her brother Tom. Her maternal grandmother Jeanette said that she was said to be her confidant. She would meet her father once a week for breakfast. She and her mother would meet and speak all the time, and so she had support systems. She had a lot of people that loved her and cared about her. In mid-2009, while she was working as a receptionist at the Lindley Godfrey Hair Salon, and this is an upscale salon that credits itself as a place where the elite of Australia go to get their hair done.
Well, goodness.
I know. And from what I can tell, Lindley Godfrey is also a photographer who would use Phoebe as a model sometimes. Like, not like in a nefarious way, but just, you know, I don't know, like for, I don't know. They seem to be professional pictures that were
hair
taken.
stuff.
Yeah. But even after she stopped working there, she would sometimes go and have coffee with Lindley. And based on some of the photographs of her, I think she was still modeling for him even near the time of her death. However, this is where she met Anthony Hampel. He was like 40-ish when they met. And the owner of W Event Management, which was really successful with clients like Michael Jackson, Prince, Kylie Minogue, AC/DC, Paris Hilton, President Clinton. The list goes on. There were a bunch of famous people that he hobnobbed with.
Mm-hmm.
He was also the son of a retired Supreme Court judge named George Hampel and the stepson of a sitting county court judge named Felicity Hampel. So, like, not only is he, like, famous on his own right from, like, his management company, but he's also, like, pretty well connected because his dad's a Supreme Court judge.
Right.
So like her other boyfriends, Ant was quite a lot older than she was. However, Ant was unlike her other boyfriends in that he was part of this like posh lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
They dated for about 5 months before Phoebe moved into his fancy schmancy apartment in the Valencia. And she did pay rent to Ant.
Yeah.
So she wasn't just living there with him. She did pay rent. This apartment was described as like all marble and glass and metal and sharp edges and, you know. Ant's housekeeper said that the carpet was white and she and Ant obsessed over keeping it clean. He apparently had told her when he hired her to make it look like no one lived there. So she said it was very labor intensive because she was always having to like polish things,
right.
And it was just very,
That seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, and like I can totally picture this even without having looked at pictures of this apartment. Like he's a rich bachelor, and for some reason rich bachelors think that this is like a good aesthetic for their apartment. I can't remember which one it was. Wives and Knives or something. That said that they could picture what's his name? The American Psycho living there. Like rich, young guy. I mean, he's not really young, but anyway. So Phoebe, on the other hand, was more like bohemian. When I said that funky. She was an artist. She was young, and like I can understand wanting a clean house, but not so much that like it shouldn't be comfortable.
Yeah.
Or that you should constantly be worried about making a mess, or So Phoebe's mother and grandmother have both said that when they visited the apartment, there is no sign that Phoebe even lived there. That there were a few framed pictures of her and Aunt, but nothing of Phoebe's was out displayed or anywhere.
Yeah.
And when they asked her about it, she was like, well, Aunt doesn't like a mess, and he doesn't like my stuff, and it's in the storage room downstairs. And this was a girl who liked to paint and draw. She had nowhere to do that. And remember, she's paying rent.
Yeah.
So, like, maybe give her a corner to paint in. I don't know. So right from the get-go, he already has this, like, controlling personality. And I guess he had even made her quit her job at the hair salon because it was too menial for his lifestyle. Like, it was an upscale salon.
Right.
And that's literally where they met.
Right, it was a fancy pants salon.
Yeah. So he got her a job at his friend's marketing firm, working part-time as a receptionist.
Well, that's much more upscale.
Yeah, I don't know how that was better, but whatever. So, by all accounts, though, Phoebe's family seemed to like him. He helped her brother get a job. He was pleasant, and they've all been quoted as saying that they were sure that Phoebe loved him, but they also didn't think the relationship would last because they were just way too different. Phoebe's dad also made a statement to the effect that Phoebe thought that Aunt was going to propose to her on an upcoming trip to Paris, and he didn't think that she wanted to do that because, as he put it, it would be like walking into a straitjacket. And they figured that it would burn out eventually. And it seemed to be heading that direction. And in the weeks leading up to Phoebe's death, it was reported that they broke up at least 4 times in the last 6 weeks of her life. So their relationship was getting volatile.
Right.
And they were only together for 18 months. So this wasn't like a long, drawn-out relationship. At one point, he kicked her out, and she called her dad to come and get her, and she stayed with him for a few days until Aunt begged her to come back. She left a couple of times, but Aunt would ask her to go back, and she would. One of the last times she left, she went to stay with her grandmother Jeanette in Malakuta, which is like 6 hours east of Melbourne. Phoebe told Jeanette that she was just going to stay there and not go back. She secured a job working at the golf course for the summer. However, Jeanette told Phoebe that she was okay with her coming to stay with her, but told her, you're always like making these rash decisions and doing things quickly, and then you always regret them. And so I think you need to go back to Melbourne. You need to quit your job properly. You need to break up with Aunt in person, and then you can come back. And she said that this is a decision that she's always regretted.
Yeah.
So
I can understand that, afterwards, but at the same time, it's good advice, follow through.
Yep.
Don't just run away from your problems, but, I guess sometimes there are certain situations that it's
you need to run away from.
That you just cut ties with. And...
Yeah. So Phoebe went back, but instead of breaking up, she decided to stay. And during these last weeks, her therapist testified that she was incredibly unhappy in her relationship. She said that Aunt could be aggressive, and she felt like she didn't have a voice in their relationship. One of her new friends, who had been friends with Aunt for over 20 years, said that Aunt was very controlling of Phoebe. And she had even, I didn't write this down, I'd read it, I don't remember where I read it. I think it was just in, like, the transcript of, like, the coroner's inquest or something, but she had even, like, told them, like, you should just walk away. Like, I'm not trying to, like, step on toes or anything, but, like, this doesn't, it's not working.
It doesn't sound like it's an enjoyable relationship for her.
No. So, other friends said that Phoebe, excuse me, other friends said that Phoebe texted them to tell them that she and Aunt had gotten to a screaming match and that he was screaming in her face. She told her family that she wanted to go to India and do aid work, and things had been, I wrote that weird, but I guess things had been bad for a while, because even as early as, like, early October, Phoebe had emailed her mom, "I'd give any excuse to get out of here. I've been thinking about my 21st present," which was a international flight, like round trip flight. "And I would like you to hang on to that for me, for there may be a time in my life that I need to get away without much notice, and I would like to have an international flight available for me. I also ask that you don't mention anything of this to anyone, and I won't bring it up again unless I need it. I have thought long and hard about this and have made my decision, so if the offer still stands, would that be okay?" And, like, I can't decide if this sounds like paranoia from her drug use, or if maybe she got herself into something she shouldn't have, or if she just wanted to get far away from Aunt so he couldn't ask her to come back, or maybe she just simply wanted the luxury of being able to get away on a whim. Like, there's just no telling. So, around this time, and I don't know if it's by Aunt's insistence, she stopped keeping in regular contact with her old friends, and she started integrating into Aunt's social circle. And one other change that's consistently noticed is that she chopped her long brown hair off into a very short black pixie. And many people say that this made her look like Aunt's older sister, Chrissy. She was also borrowing clothes from Chrissy all the time, especially, like, fancy gowns when she was going to events with Aunt.
Yeah.
And so, like, Chrissy doesn't seem like she was a bad person or anything, but, like, you know, it does, you know, like, in domestic abuse situations, like, you know, there's a lot of times when, like, they try to cut you off from, like, your family and your friends and things, and that almost sounds like what that was, like, you know, like, your friends, you shouldn't be hanging around with those people, like, they're, you know, whatever, but it doesn't sound good, any of it.
No, like I said, it doesn't even sound like it was an enjoyable relationship for her, so...
Yeah. Like, it doesn't even sound like it was an enjoyable relationship for him.
Right.
Like, I just...
Other than getting off on the control or whatever, you know, but it's not like either of them were having a traditionally good time.
Right? Yeah. So, on Monday, November 29th, Phoebe had an appointment with her psychologist, and that evening she and Aunt had dinner with another couple. So, the friend of Aunt's that I mentioned earlier that had been, like, cut your ties, like, her name is Vanessa Levin, and she later testified at the coroner's inquest about what Phoebe told her about this dinner. And apparently it ended abruptly. And I guess that somewhere in the conversation it had turned to, like, mental health or something, and Phoebe was, like, opening up to the woman they were having dinner with and was talking about her own struggles with, like, depression and drinking. And Aunt kept shutting her down and wouldn't let her talk and was like, "We are not talking about this here." And they got into a fight and they left. And so when they got home, they got into a screaming argument in the parking garage and Phoebe left. She called her old friend Brendan Hessian and they met at a bar. And Brendan said in interviews that the whole time that they were there, her phone was just buzzing and buzzing and buzzing and buzzing. And that when they left the bar, after just an hour, she had 27 missed calls from Aunt.
Which, again, this sounds very, like, typical abusive and controlling.
So, out of anger or frustration or whatever, she threw her phone across the street and it broke. And so, it should be noted that she had two phones at this time. She had, like, an old Nokia phone, like, from her before times, I'm going to call it. And then Aunt had given her an iPhone, and it was the iPhone that she broke. But 27 missed calls in an hour is insane. Like, it doesn't make anything better.
No.
Like, you don't look at that and go, "Oh, he likes me so much. He called me 27 times. Right. It's more like, "Oh my God, like, give me a minute." So, Anyway, she left the bar with her broken phone and she went to her mom's house. Her mom wasn't home, but her mom's partner Russell was. And I guess he, like, made her a cup of tea and stayed up with her till, like, 3 talking. And during the conversation, she complained about her relationship with Aunt and told him that she wanted out of the relationship. Tuesday, November 30th, Phoebe went back to the apartment after she knew that Aunt would be gone for work. And I was just thinking about how miserable that is when you're trying to avoid somebody that you live with.
Exactly.
And, like, you just want to make sure that you're there when they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so she made 3 phone calls this morning. She called her therapist asking for an appointment, but she couldn't get in. Mm-hmm. And I think the therapist's office told her that if she needed to talk to someone right away, she should call the crisis line at the hospital. And so she did call the crisis line. She also called her psychologist. And when the psychologist, Joanna Young, later testified at the coroner's inquest, she stated that Phoebe was very distressed and she felt that she had transitioned from suicidal ideation to intention. However, it doesn't seem that she felt it was emergent because she didn't feel the need to call for, like, emergency relief or anything.
Right.
She said that Phoebe didn't explicitly state that she wanted to hurt herself, that she just felt that that was implied. And that same day, she texted her grandmother Jeanette at 4 p.m. telling her, "I'm okay, I'll call you tomorrow, kiss, kiss." And then she left the apartment before Aunt came home from work. So in the days after Phoebe's death, her mom, Natalie, had a recorded conversation with Aunt, and he said that she was either with Brendan again or a drug dealer this night. Like, he didn't actually know. I think he was just speculating. And that she got back to the apartment just after midnight.
Okay.
So Wednesday, December 1st at 10:30 a.m., Phoebe sent a strange text to her mother, her grandmother, Aunt, her boss. I think there were other people, but I forgot to go back and write them down. It said, "Hi, family. I'm in bed about to sleep, and when I wake up, I will transform into the most incredible human being you have ever seen. Not. I will go to hospital. It is much safer there, and I hear that the special tonight is tomato soup. Delicious, nutritious. I love you all very much, but not enough to send an individual text. Sorry about that. Time is sleep, and I must be on my way. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. XO."
Okay.
Yeah. So, like, her family's concerned.
Right. I think anybody would be.
Yeah. Because, you know, Phoebe is a writer, and she, like, does her, like, poems and stuff, but, like, this was just weird.
Uh-huh.
And so they all started, like, texting and calling, but she didn't answer the phone. Finally, Jeanette, her grandmother, got a hold of Aunt. He claimed that he hadn't even seen the text, but that she was fine when he left that morning. She was sleeping off a, quote, bender, and that he would swing by sometime during the day to check on her. Building records show that he went into the apartment at 12:40 p.m. and stayed for about 10 minutes. And this apartment building, you had to have a special key fob to, like, access literally everything in the building. So you had to swipe it to enter the parking garage, the building, the elevator, the apartments, everything. So there's record of anytime anyone comes and goes. He also claims that Phoebe had taken Stilnox, which is like the Australian equivalent of Ambien. And this was prescribed to him, and he claims that he took the bottle when he left. And I think he said that she had only taken like 1 or 2, but was concerned that she'd wake up and forgot that she had taken it and take more. And so he does later say in that recorded conversation with Natalie that when he got home, he made her dinner and she took a bath, and they talked about, like, getting her well, and that she seemed to be fine. So now we're at Thursday, December 2nd. Aunt and Phoebe had plans to meet Phoebe's dad, Lynn, for dinner at the Golden Triangle that evening for Lynn's birthday. Aunt says he left the apartment around 9 a.m. and that Phoebe was, quote, sleeping peacefully, and he, like, stresses this every time anybody asks him about it. She's sleeping peacefully. She was sleeping with, and her dog Yoshi was sleeping in the bed with her. And so analysis of her computer shows that she sent an email and spent some time on her computer after this. At 11:43 a.m., the fire alarm went off in the building, and there's CCTV footage showing Phoebe dressed in jeans, a gray tank top, flip-flops, and sunglasses walking Yoshi on a leash out of the building.
Okay.
Part of the video shows her kind of stumble, and people, like, speculate if she was drunk or high, but I'll tell you what I observed. So, there's a few people around, because they're, everybody's leaving the building, and it looks like a lady says something to her, and she, like, kind of stops and turns to, like, either, like, respond or hear what the lady was saying or whatever, and then when she turns back around, she kind of stumbles.
Yeah.
And her dog kind of maybe is a pit bull mix from the pictures I've seen of him, so he's not a small dog. So I think, like, just from what I saw, like, she could have been drunk or high, I don't know. But, like, I trip over a flat surface.
Right.
Like, I've fallen off of my flat flip-flops.
I was going to say, I've fallen off of my flip-flops before, so...
So I don't necessarily think this was an indicator that she was intoxicated.
No.
But, I mean, based on the last few days of her life, she may have been. 7 minutes later at 11:50, there's CCTV footage showing her going back into the building. Apparently, this footage has been censored by the coroner at the request of the Hampel family. So all that anyone has is like a still image of her entering the building. And this is the last anyone sees her alive. So sometime between noon and 7 p.m., she somehow gets into the garbage chute and plummets to her death.
Why would they censor her coming into the building?
I don't know. I don't know what's on the video. And, he's been cleared of all wrongdoing, and we're not suggesting otherwise. So, I don't know. Key fob records show the aunt came into the apartment at 6:09 that evening. Are you keeping an eye on it, making sure it doesn't stop again?
That, and I keep listening to our air conditioner that I hope the entire world can't hear.
Well, I do the little, like, reduce the, like, ambient sound, and so it usually helps a lot, because it does that every week.
Yeah, it's just really loud this week.
It is loud. Okay, so, back to this.
Yes.
Key fob records show the aunt came into the apartment at 6:09 that evening. He says he doesn't remember if the door was locked or not. When he walked into the apartment, Phoebe didn't appear to be there. He found 2 glasses on the table, broken glass on the floor. Phoebe's purse and keys were on the counter. Her laptop was open, and her Gmail was up. There was a torn couch cushion. This kind of has been proven to be Yoshi's doing, because he seemed to do naughty things when he was left alone.
Yeah.
Which I was like, how mad do you think Mr. Make It Look Unlived In loved having this, like, dog chewing his furniture? I was surprised she had a dog, because he doesn't seem like a dog person, but...
Maybe that was the one thing she got for paying rent.
Right. There was blood on the computer desk and mouse and on a door frame. It wasn't, like, copious amounts of blood. It was, like, smears of blood, like small smears of blood.
Generally, you don't find blood on your computer desk.
Phoebe's hair straightener was plugged in and turned on and sitting on the bathroom floor. The hair straightener being out makes sense because she would have been getting ready to have dinner with her dad. Aunt also claims that there was a shrine on their bed. That's his word. He said that there was a picture of him, a picture of her cat. There's literally no other mention of a cat in this whole story.
Okay.
And some random scribbled notes that there were candles burning. The shrine was in the middle of the bed, he claims. Aunt is the only one ever to have seen this shrine.
Yeah.
When police came into the apartment later and took pictures, the shrine was not there. The pictures he described were, like, on, like, the nightstand and stuff. So, so either it was never there, or Aunt dismantled it before the police came up.
Yeah.
Alright, so I want you to pretend to be Aunt.
Okay.
Tell me what you do next.
After what?
After you walk into your apartment, your girlfriend is gone, you find glass and blood and her hair straightener, and what do you do next?
Well, after I have made sure she's nowhere to be found in the apartment, I call the police.
Well, you are wrong. So, Aunt cracks open a cold one. He smokes a cigarette. He gets on the computer. He calls a colleague, and then he calls his friend Vanessa Levin. Computer analysis shows that he looked through Phoebe's computer between 6:19 and 6:34. Then at 6:51, Lynn, her dad, calls Phoebe's iPhone to tell her that he's running late for dinner. And this is where Aunt's story and Lynn's story differ a lot.
Okay.
So first of all, Aunt had claimed initially that he had taken Phoebe's iPhone to be repaired on Wednesday morning when he left for work.
Okay.
Because remember, she had thrown it and broke it.
it.
But then people pointed out if that was true, how did she send us that weird tomato soup text?
Well, didn't she have another phone?
But it came from her iPhone number.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so then he was like, oh, I guess I took it on Thursday morning, not Wednesday morning. And just to give him the benefit of the doubt, remember, he's been fully exonerated of any wrongdoing, and we're not suggesting otherwise. Maybe in his distress, he just forgot what day he grabbed it.
Yeah. I forget what days I do things.
I also, because they had mentioned that he had opened GarageBand on her computer, and I was like, well, she had a Mac, so maybe she sent it via, like, iMessage on her computer, but iMessage wasn't around at this time, so that wasn't a thing.
But I always think that I would be terrible if police ever asked me anything, because I remember nothing.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I'm no good at remembering things, so I know I would never be able to describe somebody, and especially if you asked me how old they were or how tall they were.
Or if you asked me what I was doing, like, on December 13th last year, they ask things like that, and I'm just like, I don't remember what I was doing 2 days ago. Right. How am I supposed to remember what I was doing on December 13th?
Right, it's like, I don't remember what I was doing 10 minutes ago, so.
Half the time I forget what words just came out of my mouth.
Right.
So, how do you think that I could possibly remember what happened, you know, weeks or months ago?
Yeah.
Like,
the only thing I can say about this is that, like, he's, like, Mr. Controlling, so I would assume he would remember these things. The iPhone or the phone repair shop does not have a record of when it was dropped off. However, Lynn claims that immediately after, like, he got voicemail, Aunt calls him. And Lynn was like, this dude has literally never called me in 18 months of him dating my daughter. Right. And then he just happens to call me for the first time immediately after I called Phoebe's iPhone. And so Aunt claims that it was just a coincidence, that he was just calling him to let him know that Phoebe wasn't there and he didn't know where she was. Which I thought was weird because she's up and left a lot of times and he's never called her family and been like, I don't know where she's at. But whatever. So Lynn encourages Aunt to call the police and report her missing. And he's understandably concerned, especially after her weird text the day before. Aunt says that he doesn't think that's a good idea because they won't do anything for 48 hours anyway. He also fails to mention the state of the apartment.
Right.
He doesn't tell Lynn about the blood or the broken glass or the weird shrine or anything. About an hour after he's been home, he calls and orders food for one from the Golden Triangle. So remember, this is the place they were supposed to go eat dinner with her.
He's doing all of the typical things that you would do if your girlfriend was missing and your house was in disarray.
Right. So, this is weird. At least I think so. I mean, you seem to think it's perfectly normal, but I think it's kind of weird.
Pretty logical.
So, I think the question everyone has about this particular detail is, like, did he assume they weren't going because Phoebe wasn't there, but he was like, man, I was ready for some Thai food.
I had a hankering.
Like, I was just ready for that Thai food, and so I'm just going to go ahead and get some.
I had a hankering for this specific dish, and I'm going to have that dish.
Yeah, I guess. So, when his food's delivered, the delivery guy is like, dude, what's going on downstairs? And Aunt is like, I don't know what's going on. What's going on downstairs? And the guy tells him there's like a zillion cops down there. So Aunt heads downstairs and stops a police officer and tells him he lives in the building and he wants to know what's going on. And the police tell him that they found a body in the compactor room. And immediately Aunt is like, my girlfriend is missing. Could it be my girlfriend? And the cop is like, shrugs. I don't know if it's your girlfriend. And so Aunt gives them some details about her appearance and tattoos, and they said that sounds like the person they found. And so then he starts offering all of this information about how he came in and she was missing, but her purse was there, and there was like the shrine on the bed, and she's depressed and she drinks a lot, and like, you know, she might have killed herself, and like And I want to say that I read that he went up to get a picture of her for the police to confirm that it was her, but I can't remember now if it was like then or like when the police go upstairs with him to look at the apartment. But either way, that seems like a lot of information to offer unasked. So now Aunt calls Lynn and lets him know that they found Phoebe and she's dead. And Lynn calls and lets her mom know. So now let's talk about the scene.
Yeah.
So when police arrived, they cordoned off the compactor room. And when EMTs arrived a few minutes later, the police wouldn't allow them into the room to check for signs of life, telling the EMTs that they would be contaminating a crime scene.
I mean, that's what the EMTs do. I mean, I don't mean that in a rude way, but I mean, they don't worry about whether or not they're going to contaminate a crime scene. Right. They go and they see if they can save the person first.
Exactly.
And whether that messes up the crime scene or not, that's what the EMTs are there for.
Right. And, like, I can't remember the name of the EMT, but she said that she lost a lot of sleep over this.
Just like with firefighters. They destroy so much evidence when they're having to
fight a fire in a yogurt shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it's just like, at that moment, it's not about the evidence.
Right. It's about preservation of life.
Yeah.
And so, the worst possible thing about this entire ordeal is that no one knows if she was still alive when the police arrived. Because no one knows when she went into that chute. And no time of death was ever established because no one bothered to check her at the scene. As far as anyone knows, not a single person, the police or the EMTs, checked to see if she was still alive. A medical examiner wasn't called to the scene, so a core body temperature wasn't checked, nor did the medical examiner even see her in situ. So, like, they didn't even know what she looked like when she died.
Yeah.
So, like I said before, it does appear that after she came down the chute and through the compactor, she was alive because the blood evidence shows that she crawled around the room. There was even blood on the back of the door.
Yeah.
Like, but it was dark. And so, and like the most gruesome detail of this entire thing is that her foot was nearly severed at the ankle by the compactor and was attached only by a tendon.
Yikes.
Yeah. And strangely, her pants were down below her knees, and her belt was only through the first 2 loops. There wasn't any sign of sexual assault, so that doesn't seem to be why, but no one knows why her pants were down.
Right.
Some people speculate that maybe her belt wasn't completely put into her jeans, like she had been interrupted while she was getting dressed. Also, if she went down the chute feet first, which she did, her pants should have ridden up, not fallen down.
Right.
And so some people speculate that maybe she was trying to remove them to tie off her injured leg. But didn't get that far. Another theory is that someone put her into the chute and then used her jeans to, like, keep her legs together to make it easier to, like, feed her into the chute. Alright, so immediately the police ruled this a suicide.
Okay.
With only the word of Aunt about her being depressed and drinking.
It seems like a weird suicide if she was still alive once she got down through the trash compactor chute thingy, and then just happened to die behind the door of blood loss. Yeah, that seems like a odd choice.
Yeah, and it had never happened before in the history of Australia.
Yeah.
They did find, in the same year, weirdly, 2 people that were found at the bottom of garbage chutes in Baltimore, Maryland, in the same apartment building, but they had both gone down, like, head first, and I didn't look into it further, so I don't know if this was, like, somebody killed both of those people, because it seems weird that 2 people in one apartment building in the same, like, year did this, but I don't know. But other than that, there hasn't really been any other death by garbage chute. Yeah, but it would be weird to do this. Like, that doesn't seem like... And her friends were even like, if she was going to commit suicide, she would have done something, like, way more dramatic or poetic. Like, she would have, like, swan dived off of a bridge, or, you know, her mom was like, I could see her, like, maybe taking a lot of pills and overdosing, or, you know...
But also, because I think that I have possibly heard this story before, because there are parts of it that just sound really familiar.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I've always thought is also, if you're going to put yourself down the trash compactor or the garbage chute or whatever you want to call it, wouldn't you go down head first? Doesn't it seem just easier to just
I don't know,
slide in head first than to try to like put your legs in there? And
and we're going to talk about the chute in just a second. So, like I said, the police immediately ruled this a suicide. What I don't understand is, if they assumed it was a suicide, why did they tell the EMTs they were going to mess up a crime scene?
Mm-hmm.
And even after the police went to the apartment and photographed the blood and the broken glass and the general state of the apartment, they still believed it to be a suicide. In the haze of alcohol and sleeping pills, she put herself into the chute and she plummeted to her death. So, Phoebe's grandfather, Lauren Campbell, is a retired detective, and he took major issue with this. Toxicology reports showed that Phoebe's blood alcohol level was 0.16, which is 3 times the legal limit. And she also had a therapeutic dose of Stilnox in her system and antidepressants. But it wasn't like an overdose of antidepressants and Stilnox. It was like she had taken like 1 or 2 and like her antidepressants for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren maintains that Phoebe, despite her steady alcohol use, couldn't handle her liquor, and that she was like basically a baby deer learning how to walk after like 2 or 3 drinks. Mm-hmm. And she got extremely clumsy. And so how did this clumsy drunk girl on sleeping pills manage to climb into this garbage chute by herself?
Right.
Additionally, there were no fingerprints found on the door to the chute. And so, about the chute. So, there's a refuse room on every floor. Mm-hmm. So, of course, it's upscale luxury. So, it's not like on Friends where it's like just across from their apartment. Right. Like, you have to go in a special room so nobody sees the trash. Mm-hmm. So, inside the room is the garbage chute. And it's like one of those doors that you have to pull down like a mailbox. Mm-hmm. And it's spring-loaded, and so it slams shut after you let it go. And the housekeeper even called it a bear trap, because she said that it was so heavy to open, and then as soon as you let it go, it like slammed really hard. And it sits about 3 feet off of the floor. It's about 14.5 inches wide and only opens about 8 inches. So it's like a little space.
Yeah.
And there's nothing around it to hold on to. Like, it's literally just in the middle of this wall. Mm-hmm. And when you drop your trash into it, it goes down at like a slight angle, and then it falls, like, goes into a vertical drop. And then before it gets to the compactor, it hits another thing that's like a 45-degree angle that feeds it into the compactor. And the compactor crushes the trash twice, and then it drops it into like a wheelie bin. And then the wheelie bins are like on a carousel. And so when that one gets full, it moves on to the next one. So because police already had it set in their minds that it was a suicide, they did the bare minimum in evidence collecting. In fact, I think they did less than the bare minimum.
Yeah.
The building manager, Eric Giamario, told the police that they needed to get the CCTV footage right away because it was on a 2-day loop, so it would record over itself after 2 days. They basically brushed him off. Like, even after he offered to download it for them. They came back 2 days later and asked for it.
Yeah.
Conveniently, I don't know. But yeah, so of course it was gone after that. So there's no CCTV footage showing her going into the chute or anybody else in that area. They didn't take the computers or the phones found in the apartment. In fact, Phoebe's Nokia phone has never been recovered. In the taped conversation between Natalie and Aunt, he claims that she lost it when she was out partying, but that's never been proven one way or another because they don't have the phone. They only tested the blood that was on the door frame to the apartment, none of the other blood. They didn't test either of the 2 glasses on the table for fingerprints or DNA. And, I mean, it's like the shoddiest police work you can imagine.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
It sounds definitely like they tried their hardest.
Right? I feel like they gave it none of their all.
Yeah, not even some of their all.
So Phoebe's body lay in the compactor room for like 9 hours or some nonsense before the crime scene investigators ever even got there. And so during her autopsy, it was noted that she had a subdural hematoma on her brain, but it was written with a question mark and listed as a possible artifact of brain removal. She had ovoid bruises on her arms that looked like grip marks, but they were not noted until the coroner's inquest years later. They were just assumed to be bruises from the fall down the chute.
Yeah.
In ovals, like fingerprints on her arm.
Yeah.
They didn't take Ant to the police station for questioning. They allowed him to give his statement in the apartment, and even like while the police officer was like taking his statement, Ant was like, just let me type it for you because you're going too slow. And so they even let him type his own statement.
Goodness.
And because they considered it a suicide, they didn't even explore any other possibilities.
So sounds like top-notch police work.
Yes. So Phoebe's grandfather, Lorne, was not at all convinced of this. And he was just like, what in the world is going on? Like, this is not how you conduct an investigation. And when you have a bizarre death, like, you don't immediately rule it one way or another, like, until you investigate it. And so he set out to do his own investigating, and he decided to figure out if it was even possible for someone to get into the chute on their own. So he enlisted 2 friends of Phoebe's who were similar in height and build, and his experiments were all recorded, and you can watch them on YouTube. He started the experiments in the actual refuge room of the Valencia, and he attached harnesses to the girls so they wouldn't actually fall down the chute. He had them dressed similar. They were barefoot like Phoebe was, and after a lot of work, the girls were both able to get into the chute, but they had to like brace themselves against the walls, and it was very physically like, you know,
it doesn't sound
difficult.
like something easy or quick to do, and especially if you're trying to kill yourself. Like, I think that there are other ways that
she had a balcony.
Yeah.
I'm
not encouraging anyone to take their own lives, but you know, I don't think you would go about it in the most complicated way.
Right. And then, like, with, like, this heavy door, and you're, like, trying to, like, lift your leg up and over it into the chute, and it, like, it just is so much. So, once their legs were in the chute, they would have to kind of, like, wiggle down. The whole time, the door's trying to close, and so it's, like, squishing them up against the top of the chute. And I got claustrophobic just watching them do this. And eventually they were able to squeeze through as long as their arms were like trailing up over their heads. And this did not align with the findings of the coroner, who stated that she had her arms by her side and used her arms and her butt to slow her descent. And if this had been the case, she would have been covered in filth because the trash chute was disgusting.
But also, why would she slow her descent?
Right. Well, because spoiler alert, the coroner says that it was a tragic accident, that she wasn't trying to hurt herself, and that it was just like death by misadventure. Yeah. And so she crawled in there and then tried to slow herself down, and so anyway, her arms would have been disgusting if this had been the case. Also, she wouldn't have fit into the opening of the chute with her hands by her sides. Like, it would have been too wide right here. And also, based on how the door was squeezing the girls as they were attempting this feat, she probably would have had, like, a bruise on her back.
Yeah.
Plus, her friends all said she was claustrophobic.
Right.
Like, that... I was claustrophobic watching them try to wiggle into this thing. I can't imagine actually doing it. So, he did multiple tests. The manufacturer of the trash compactor even built him a replica of the chute so that he could conduct his experiments. They had one on the set of 60 Minutes Australia and had one of the girls show how hard it was to get into it. I mean, and she's got her hands, like, all over the walls and, like, had to do a lot of balancing and, you know, like, trying to get in there. And they didn't believe that Phoebe, who, you know, had her blood alcohol was 3 times the legal limit, plus she was on sleeping pills, would have had like the dexterity or the balance to do this. Lauren also experimented to see how easy it would be to put someone else into the chute, And so he had a man kind of fireman carry one of the girls. And, like, she was just, like, limp, like, playing, you know, like, unconscious or whatever. And because the guy could, like, control the door with one hand and then feed her into the chute feet first, it was pretty easy to get her in. But again, her arms had to be up over her head. So, in the days that followed, Phoebe's family and Aunt's family met. And they said it was so weird that George Hampel, the ex-Supreme Court judge, kept telling Lynn, Phoebe was a troubled girl. Like, there was nothing you could have done. Like, this was just a tragic suicide. Like, just over and over to her dad. And he was just like, I'm sorry, I'm a psychiatrist. Who are you to diagnose my child? But it was almost like they were just trying to, like, push this narrative on them. I actually would just remember that I forgot to write it down. So the concierge that found her had to take, like, weeks off of work because she was so distraught over this. When she got back, one of Aunt's friends kept showing up, like, every other day or something with flowers and chocolates and stuff and telling her, oh, she was troubled and it wasn't your fault. And, but, like, weird.
That's not ominous.
And it's not normal. Like, it's not normal behavior. No. Aunt Hampel has been cleared of any wrongdoing, and we are not suggesting otherwise. So, Vanessa Levin, his friend of, like, 20 years, testified at the inquest that Aunt was being weird. That he seemed to be able to turn his emotions on and off. Like, one minute he'd be hanging on the couch scrolling Facebook, and then if anyone came over, especially one of the Handsjuk family, he would, like, curl up in a ball on the couch and start crying. And he even wrote on his Facebook, even before the police had, like, officially declared it a suicide or whatever, like, as some of you may know, like, Phoebe took her own life because she was so sad, or, like, some stupid nonsense like that. And they were just like, you hadn't just said, like, she tragically died. Like, you had to, like, again, like, they're pushing this narrative.
Like, hammering the suicide point.
And so, I forgot to put this up in the place where I was talking about when he was giving his statement. But the officer who was taking his statement the night of Phoebe's death also said that Aunt kept, like, sniffling and acting like he was crying, but the cop didn't see any tears or, like, mucus or any sign that he was actually crying.
Yeah.
And so, additionally, they found out that Aunt had registered himself as Phoebe's next of kin. And so all calls from the medical examiner's office and reports and calls from the police and everything were coming to him instead of to Phoebe's family. And he had even applied for her death benefit and received, like, $100,000.
That's all normal.
Right? But eventually, after, like, a lot of fighting, he did give the money to her brothers. He shouldn't have claimed it in the first place. No. And then his father had signed some form stating that he and Phoebe had lived together, like, 6 months longer than they had even known each other, just to give him permission to, like, file for all of these things.
Yeah.
And so at one point, Natalie had met with Aunt's stepmother and, like, her caterer or something, and they were talking about funeral arrangements, and Natalie said that Aunt's stepmother was basically telling her how it was going to be. And she was just like, I have to leave.
Gotta go now.
And so after all of the disagreements between the two families, they ended up having separate memorial services. Aunt's was held at a yacht club, and everyone who went to that one said that it was less about Phoebe and more about appearances.
I can't imagine that at all.
Right? And in addition to the memorial service that the Handsjuk family held, they also took her ashes to Malakuta because that was her favorite place. And her father's father was, like, Norwegian and had taught him how to bend wood, and so he created, like, this little, like, wooden boat. And they put her ashes and letters from her family and friends on it, and they draped it in marigolds, and they set it on fire. And they gave her a Viking funeral.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's pretty traditional Viking-y.
Yeah. Aunt did not attend.
Well.
You know, but
He was distraught.
He claimed that they were in, like, a common law marriage, but, yeah.
He was too distraught to attend.
Right. So, of course, Phoebe's family wanted answers, and they were actually distraught at losing their daughter and their granddaughter and their sister, and they didn't believe that Phoebe killed herself because she was looking forward to decorating and celebrating for her brother Nikolai's 18th birthday, which was like the next day.
Yeah.
She was going to go eat dinner with her dad that night for his birthday. She had other celebrations coming up that she was looking forward to, so it just didn't seem likely. And they were like, plus she, like, they, especially her friends were like, I don't think that she would have, like, done that in such a gruesome way to her family. Like, it just didn't seem right. So they requested a coroner's inquest, and that was finally granted. So it's kind of like a trial, almost. And so they all have lawyers, and the coroner listens to testimony and whatever. I have never loved the idea of a coroner,
right?
Because it's an elected official. They don't even have to have medical training. And so, I don't know, even in the United States, I don't like the idea of a coroner. I think there's some positions that, like, shouldn't be elected positions.
Yeah, but it should be based on
and also
experience and skill.
Right. And a coroner should have medical training, I think, if they're going to be making decisions about causes of death and things. Like, I just think that should be the way it is. So Aunt apparently was, like, adamantly opposed to this inquest, but her family pushed for it, and it was finally granted, but it was like years after her death. So anyway, so they finally started investigating. Computers were finally seized and analyzed. However, like, they discovered that all of Phoebe's sent emails had been deleted.
Can't they recover that kind of stuff?
Well, so here's the thing, is they requested from Gmail to release her emails, but because her death was not listed as a homicide, Gmail wouldn't give them to them. It has to be like a homicide. If it's a suicide or I don't know, they won't release them. So they couldn't get those. Aunt had lost the SIM card to Phoebe's iPhone and had given the phone away to a colleague, so the phone couldn't even be analyzed.
Sounds about right.
The DVR that the CCTV had been on, because they had collected it, even though it had mostly been recorded over, but the DVR was lost.
Okay.
Yeah. And because there was just so much that hadn't been analyzed or collected the night of her death, her family expected the coroner to rule it like an open finding, meaning that they couldn't conclusively rule out suicide or an accident or homicide, but it made it possible to investigate it further if new evidence came to light. And the coroner's counsel also recommended an open finding. However, the coroner ruled Phoebe's death an accident. And his explanation for this whole thing was that Phoebe cut herself on the broken glass that was found in the apartment. She was cleaning it up and putting it in a bag, and she took the bag to the garbage room, and in a delusional state, not meaning to hurt herself, she climbed into the chute. She slowed her fall with her arms in her butt, so that's where the bruises came from. But there's a couple of problems with his analysis. Like,
well,
one,
also,
it's like,
how delusional do you have to be to put yourself in the trash instead of...
Well, and it's like, it just is, it sounds like speculation.
Yeah.
Like, so the trash bags in the compactor room were not taken for analysis, so there's no evidence that Phoebe took a bag of glass to the refuse room. Plus, there was still glass on the floor.
Right.
There was blood smeared in the apartment. If she was bleeding, there probably would have been blood on the handle to the garbage chute. Additionally, as we discussed earlier, she wouldn't have fit down the chute with her arms by her side.
Right.
Plus, they would have been filthy, and they weren't. And so, like, none of it seemed to be based on actual evidence. So, additionally, studies have shown that people under the influence of still knocks do bizarre things.
Right.
But not bizarre like climb into garbage chutes. So, usually, it's like normal everyday activities. Like, people on still knocks have been known to clean and eat and even drive in their sleep, but it's usually like muscle memory activities, things you do all the time. Plus, with her blood alcohol, it just seems unlikely that she would have had the dexterity to do this. Her family wanted to appeal, but the way the law was in Victoria, it was extremely hard to appeal a coroner's finding. They had to find a perverse error in law, and if they lost, they'd be responsible for like hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, which they couldn't risk. And so, thanks to media attention by the Phoebe's Fall podcast, which was created by Richard Baker and Michael Batchelard, that are two reporters for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, the Victorian government was planning to review the law to make it easier for families to make appeals to a coroner's inquest. So, one last crazy story.
Okay.
So, after Phoebe's death, Ant moved on and got married, and then he got divorced. And then he started dating a 25-year-old model and dancer named Bailey Snyder. In June 2018, on a Saturday morning around 8:30, she was living with her parents, and she had spoken to them, and one source had said that she had told them that she had broken up with Ant the night before. And her family was leaving for errands or something, and she was on the phone, and it sounded like she was maybe arguing with Ant, because she sounded upset, and she was arguing. When they returned home, they found Bailey on the kitchen floor with a gold cord tied tightly around her neck.
Oh, man.
The police immediately ruled it a suicide. However, there was no place in the kitchen where she could have hung herself from. The ruling from the coroner in Bailey's case was self-inflicted asphyxiation in the family home. And I'm not saying that Ant had anything directly to do with this. But he seems to be like the unluckiest guy in the world for two of his girlfriends to have committed suicide. Like, is life with him really that bad?
Right.
So, as far as Phoebe's death, aside from suicide or accidental death, many people find so many pieces of her case suspicious. So, with a death so bizarre, why did the police not investigate it as a homicide to begin with and then rule that out? She had an abrasion on her jaw and on one side of her face, and then a bruise on her brain on the other side of her head, like maybe she had been hit and then knocked against like a wall. And additionally, she had those grip mark bruises on her arms. And so, you know, is it possible that when the fire alarm went off earlier in the day, it messed up the key swipe system and someone was able to get into the building and, like, attacked her? Could she have had some kind of quick altercation as she was getting ready to go out with her dad that resulted in her getting knocked out? And maybe somebody panicked and put her into the garbage chute and then called someone who was maybe well connected to tell them, hey, I did something stupid. And that person told them, go wipe the prints off of the hatch and act normal until the police arrived. And the police treated it like, and then instructed the police to treat it like a suicide. Or was this really just a tragic accident?
I guess we'll never know.
I don't think we'll ever know. So, anyway, there we go. I think it's the longest one, but not by a lot, just by a couple of minutes.
Just by maybe 10 minutes.
Yep. Anyway, so there's another sad story for you.
It's another sad story, but yeah. Like I said, I think that I have heard that one. The part about the trash chute and her not dying before she got to the bottom and stuff like that all sounded familiar. But, it's just one of those that, like, has bothered me ever since I listened to it, because I was like, how in the world was this just botched so badly? Yeah.
Like, why did it seem like the police just did not care about what happened
like,
to her?
It was a really bizarre scenario, and so you would think that they would have done some investigating just
and
because.
With the broken glass and the, you know, all of the things, like, why would she have, like, left her hair straightener on the floor, and why would, you know, I'm sorry, I'm very fidgety today. Like, why would she... I don't know. I guess, like, they tried to say, well, she was delusional, and so, like, she didn't mean to, like, go in there with the idea that she was going to climb into the trash chute. I guess just a whim came over her.
But like I said, how delusional do you have to be to just, you know, even if she was intentionally going in there to throw away trash, to then put yourself in the trash chute. Yeah.
Well, like, and the coroner said, well, you know, with her penchant for climbing. And I was like, did she have a penchant for climbing?
Like, when did anybody mention that?
I'm like, when did you hear about this? Like,
but I still don't know that equates to putting yourself in the trash chute.
Yeah, it's just so much.
She needed to climb really bad all of a sudden, and
I know, it's just incredibly bizarre, and it's just so frustrating, and I'm sure, like, for her family, it's even more frustrating, because they're like, how could you, like, why do you think this, and, like, why didn't you do more? And
well, it's definitely bizarre and mysterious, and so I feel like there definitely should have been more done, more looked into, because
yep,
it's not a typical suicide.
No. And then before her mom, like, reached out to, like, the Phoebe's Fall, like, producer guys, this wasn't even on the radar of the news. Like, I think that there, like, initially had been, like, you know, police are investigating the death of a woman in the Valencia apartments. But other than that, it was like, it wasn't, like, in the news. It wasn't like, oh, wow, this girl, like, fell down the garbage chute and this is so weird. And, you know, and so until they brought it to light, like, nobody even really knew it happened.
Yeah. The girl I was talking about, her name was Phoebe Bishop. And she's been missing since May 15th. They found remains in the Goodnight Scrub National Park, which they assume are hers. And they've charged the roommates with her murder.
Yeah.
But,
it's sad.
They said that they were taking her to the airport because she was supposed to go see her boyfriend. And this is common knowledge. She was supposed to go see her boyfriend. So she was going to go to the airport and fly to Perth to see him. And they say that she was anxious or something. I don't remember what they said, but that she was anxious or upset or something. And so they had pulled over half a mile before they got to the airport to let her calm down.
Okay.
And they all got out of the car. And they turned around and she was just gone.
Oh.
They assumed that she just walked to the airport. But I'm just like,
wouldn't you
have been able to see her down the road?
Right.
She didn't, like, sprint like some kind of superhero.
Yeah. Well, like Maura Murray, like, she was there and then she was gone. But, I mean, there were woods and, you know, so.
But, yeah, so, they claim that she just sort of vanished.
Okay.
But, and so they just left, assuming that she walked to the airport.
Seems like they could have come up with a better story.
Right. So, yeah, they've been charged with her murder.
Yeah.
Again, she was 17, living with two 30-somethings. I don't know why she was living with these two 30-somethings, but...
Yep.
And apparently their house was, like, a disgusting, like, hoarder house full of, like, dead animals.
Ew.
And...
Those were my least favorite episodes of Hoarders.
Yeah, I always had a hard time watching the dead animal episodes. But yeah, apparently their house was, like, full of dead animals and...
Dang it.
Yeah. So I don't know how she was living there to begin with. There's nothing that would make me live like that.
No.
I'd be like, Mom, I'm moving back in with you.
Right. I don't know. Maybe some more details about that will come to light as it goes on, but...
I've just heard snippets of it so far, so...
Yep. Alright, well, I guess we should say goodbye.
I guess.
Alright, our social media is Twisted and Mysterious. Our email is twistedandmysteriouspodcast@gmail.com. And
send us your listener stories and any ideas for things you'd like to hear us cover. Also, rate and review our podcast.
Yes, please.
And share it with your friends.
Yes, please.
We need some more interaction and some more spread. And we finally got to South Africa, but not South America. So,
yeah,
we're still trying to hit that sweet spot there in South America.
I know, Amy was like, ooh, Elon Musk is listening to your podcast. And I was all gross.
He's our one South African listener.
Yeah.
But, anyway, so, help us out if you can, especially if you're somebody who is returning to our podcast week after week. We would really appreciate it if you shared our podcast and rated and reviewed it so we can get more exposure.
Yep. And thank you for coming back and listening every week. We really appreciate it.
We appreciate it, and, we're shocked and awed by it because we never even expected to make it past episode 1. Yep. So,
all right.
We definitely appreciate all of you who do listen to us weekly. Yep. Especially whoever is in Singapore downloading every single one of our episodes.
Yeah, shout out to Singapore, man.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, whoever you are in Singapore, let us know.
Yeah, let us know because you are a rock star. Yep. All right. So, I guess that's all we really have for this week.
And I don't know. Maybe Farron will tell us a story next week.
I might tell you a story next week. It depends on whether or not I get my research done in time. Anyway, so as always, remember that people are gross and don't get murdered and don't climb in any trash chutes.
No, there should be a warning sign saying do not climb in here.
There probably are.
Yeah, probably. Okay, bye.
Bye.